All right. You know how every time you start trying to record a video, there are a million issues that need fixing and setting up, and different microphones to try and different applications to try. And I always tell myself, like, it's okay because, all right, this is a lot of work for just this one small stupid video, but it's a long-term investment. I'm setting it up for, future convenience. And then somehow it's always long enough between videos that just everything has changed. Like, this is a different laptop, this is different microphone, this is different. I'm using Zoom for the first time to record this because I tried OBS and suddenly OBS is in 15 frames a second with my camera. This is the same camera as what Zoom is using, but for some reason OBS can only do it in 15 FPS. Anyway, this is a devlog, and I haven't done one of those for a long time, for a lot of reasons. And as I was doing audio tests and stuff, I tried to explain what those reasons were, and it got super boring. So I won't go into detail too much there. Just, it's a story-based game, so there's a lot to spoil. I'm doing more managing these days, which is a pain. I don't want to be doing that, but it's a kind of necessary evil right now. Just in terms of the alternative is to hire a manager, and that is a whole bunch of management work. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg situation there. And yeah, I guess just a bit more swamped in general. So there hasn't been a lot of sort of like downtime. I also think this game is a bit more figured out than Heat Signature was. And so Heat Signature, I did a lot of devlogs just to think through, like, how should missions even work, and what is a personal mission, and how do you progress towards liberating the galaxy, and is that even your goal? Should there even be a goal? Big things like that. Whereas this, we kind of know what it is. And it just takes a long time to make all the stuff. It's a content-driven game, and you just got to make all the content. And the content always raises new questions about the systems. And so the systems need work too. We recently hired a level designer, Steve Lee, and he's incredibly quick and very good at making levels. And it would be lovely if I could just sort of let him make the rest of the game, do a huge share of my work. And I mean, he is doing a huge share of my work because he's doing a large amount of the level design, which I was previously doing. But unfortunately, I can't just take the reins off and let it go on autopilot. I'm still needed quite a lot because there are a lot of questions about how should the mechanics work, what kind of enemy abilities will be in this chapter. It's just sort of been the kind of, our approach has just been that we introduce new enemies and a new wizard in each chapter. And there are 4 chapters, not including the prologue. And I guess just each one of those needs figuring out. And the first attempt at figuring them out is usually not ideal. There's usually tweaks to be made. And of course, all the level design depends on that. You build a level for one set of mechanics, and the mechanics change, the level usually doesn't work anymore. Because our levels are quite tight. They're not quite as tight as Into the Breach, but they're certainly not as big and sprawling as like XCOM. And when I'm trying to describe what the game is, where the game falls on the puzzle to strategy spectrum, it's on the puzzly side of things. But if we told you this is a puzzle game, I think it would be a surprisingly open-ended puzzle game. It doesn't feel like there's a couple of design solutions. It feels like we always make sure there is a solution for any given set of perks and whatever you might have going on. But hopefully, while individual situations might just have a couple of clearly good ways of approaching it, certainly after turn 1, the situation is so fluid that we can't predict what situation you'll be in, so there is no puzzle design there. And it's always hard to talk about, like, what's the other end of the spectrum, the strategy. Like, what is non-puzzly about a strategy game? When I think about XCOM, it isn't a puzzle game, and it doesn't feel puzzly. I'm almost never sitting there just scratching my head about, like, how do I piece together these things to make this go my way? You're just trying to sort of optimize and just try and do as much damage as you can and hide your people as much as you can. And it's all a matter of degrees and chances and I don't know what the hell that was. And yeah, a lot of push and pull and kind of vagueness. It's less clear cut. It's less binary, I suppose would be the more positive way of saying it. And our game is not that. Our game is, small health values. Things are often going to absolutely die or be completely untouched. There is in between ground, and that's increasing as the game goes on. But yeah, it's it's on the puzzly end of this puzzle strategy spectrum. And one of the questions there is like, where is the fun bit? Like, why is it fun? Why is it exciting? Where are the high points in this game? And so in a strictly puzzle game, it's all about just kind of thinking of a solution, right? And in a prescribed puzzle game, sort of an authored puzzle game where every puzzle is hand designed and has a specific solution in mind, the pleasure of it is sort of knowing that solution's out there and happening upon it and having the moment of like, aha, I found it, the solution. And even when those games do have multiple solutions, there's usually a solution, and either the other solutions are sort of functionally equivalent to that, or the other solutions are like extra difficult abstract thinking things that unlock, you know, alternate paths and go further than the basic one. In which case that doesn't diminish my feeling of, I found it, the solution. And we're not like that. And then in a strategy game, you get this sort of like, it's more of a slow burn, but you get this feeling of kind of, you know, it's like leading an actual team kind of thing. It's like being an actual commander, and the feeling of managing your troops well. And I guess management is actually a pretty good word for a thing that is involved in XCOM that is less so in ours. And so here in this middle ground, for me, the high points come when you think of a clever plan and pull it off. And that is the common through line between all of my games that I've designed, the big ones anyway. They all let you come up with a plan and then try it out. And ideally, the plan, your plan can vary from what I had in mind when I built the level. And that is what I love in games in general. There's most of the games I really, really love let me think of a plan with the tools I have that combines the tools I have with the obstacles and with elements in the environment and other stuff like that, in order to come up with some way around an obstacle. And Breach Wizards is definitely producing those moments now. We have enough abilities, and they're sort of wild enough that there are definitely some very non-obvious solutions, and figuring out how to use them together is really paying off. So lately we've been working on a class called the Necromedic, who is someone, I guess I won't go into her story, I'll just say her ability is that she can bring back the dead, and not as zombies, just bring them back exactly as they were. And that means that she can only heal your team if she kills them first, which mechanically that was going to be a whole thing of like, you have to sort of spend an action to kill them and then spend another action to bring them back, or spend some other resource to bring them back. The way it's played out mechanically, it just plays way better if that's all just one action. You can just do it all in one thing. And so it's not mechanically very relevant that she has to do that. She kind of functions a lot like a healer. So don't get too excited about the mechanical weirdness of this. But this is a class we've had planned for a long time. It was originally going to be one of the last ones you unlocked. Now it's going to be the third character. And I wanted it to be last originally because it's a bit of a wacky one. Like, that's a bit of a strange thing to be able to reverse death. And it was in the back of my mind that this is probably going to be a hard one to design, because like I had faith that like there'll be some way to have that play a role in a normal level and freeform gameplay without that, you know, completely destroying the balance of the game. I don't know why I have faith in that. It sounds like it would destroy the balance of the game, doesn't it? It sounds like it removes death from the game, which is the main point of failure, pretty much the only point of failure. Funnily enough, the opposite happened, where it actually turned out not to be that useful. You just didn't end up using it because your people don't die normally, and they don't even take a lot of hits, because it is quite a puzzly strategy game. It's one where you sit there and you think about, how do I get through this turn without taking any damage? That's true of Into the Breach as well. You know, sometimes you do take damage, but most of the time your sort of starting position is how do I get through this turn without taking any damage? And if I have to, okay, but let's make sure it's not going to kill me, and yada yada. And all of that means that health is not, certainly in the opening chapter of the game, has not been much of a resource. In fact, that was something we got in feedback, was people felt like the health bar was almost irrelevant because you just solve the puzzle and get away clean. We got a lot of other mechanics coming in to make health more of a resource, to make it something you have to think about more and manage more. But still, it wasn't ending up being worth it to kill your own people and bring them back. The killing part, like I say, is mechanically irrelevant, really just healing them. But I guess it's the relevant thing is that it's an infinitely strong heal. No matter what has happened to the person, you can bring them back to full health. And that wasn't enough because of the way our game actually works and feels. That the cost of like moving one of your people over to the body to do that was pretty high, and then spending mana or spending an action or whatever, however we balanced it, we made it free for a while. But yeah, it's a bit of a knife edge. If you make it free, then death really is irrelevant. If you make it cost something, then you don't really end up using it that much. What I wanted it to do is to unlock new plans. You know, it's all about plans. And previously, I wanted there to be, you know, situations where, okay, this idea, I could get this person over here and get something done, but they're going to die in the process, so I won't do that. And now you've got the Necromedic, you're like, well, dying in the process isn't the worst thing that can happen. Like, there's a way out of that. And then beyond that, here's a thing I could do that would take out the enemy, but it also kills my own guy, like, you know, throwing a grenade or something that's going to kill both of them. Previously, a no-no with the Necromantic, maybe. So that's the kind of stuff I wanted. And we do have a bit of that too. I think we're going to go probably more in that direction. But the way I've ended up making it just more commonplace useful is I was pretty happy with this actually, because as it turns out, this makes it more true to the narrative rather than less, which is when you bring someone back, they also go back to having 1 mana. And 1 mana in this game is a big deal. Anything that requires mana at all is usually a very powerful ability. Your basic attacks don't take any, even if they're magic. And 1 mana will let you, for example, do a chain shock that chains through maybe 3 people and knocks them all in different directions. A lot of abilities, the Navy Seer's time boost ability lets him give a teammate an action for 1 mana. And so however much mana he has, he can give that many actions to his teammates, just no restrictions. And that leads to pretty wild solutions. So mana is very useful. And so the way narratively the Necromedic's ability works is it rewinds the body. It's not sort of repairing it or gluing it together with magic. It just rewinds it in time. It goes back an hour. So it's in the state it was in an hour ago. And so it actually makes sense that you would have the mana you had an hour ago. So you spend your mana, you get rewound, you got your mana back. And what that actually ends up translating to is that she now has a way of converting her or transferring mana of hers to her teammates. And this game often comes down to not just how much mana do you have as a team, but who has the mana. We like to push you to think about that a lot. There's little objectives and bits of intel in the world that when you grab them, you get some mana, because mana is sort of tied to confidence in this fiction, tied to sort of the feeling of success of like, yes, we can do this kind of thing. And so we invite you to decide who should complete that objective, because that person will get some mana, and what every wizard's ability is completely unique. And so it's all about which person needs to have the mana in this moment. And yeah, it turns out that having someone who can transfer mana is very valuable, because often you end up with mana on the wrong people. And the fact that you also revive them into the bargain is great. And we are starting to get some situations now where people do organically die, or you have a situation where like, don't think I can save you, Seer. And I'll have to res you next turn. So that's really cool. The other thing obviously we've done is you know, very loosely in the fiction, the idea is that you know, 5% of people maybe in this world are wizards, and to be a wizard, it just means that you discovered some ability you can do, and everyone's abilities are not every single one is completely unique in the world, but there aren't really strict classes of like, you're a fire mage or you're a whatever. Most people have an ability that is either completely unique, or if there's someone out there with something similar, but it's a personal thing to you. You develop your ability, and you generally just have one. But that's not good for the game, because we don't want every character to just have one power, right? So actually, it's more of a kind of family of powers that are based around a central thing. So that the freelance witch, her basic attack is a lightning bolt that pushes people back. Her mana spending attack can chain the lightning through multiple people, and then she has a gale grenade which knocks people back. So it's thematically gameplay wise, is very closely related to the others. It's all knockback. And thematically, she's a storm witch. Lightning is something she can do naturally. With the help of a wand, she can chain it through people. And then a sort of stormy gale kind of thing is another thing that she has a sort of affinity for. And so fictionally, there's another explanation for why how you can have a thing that's different as that to your main power, and it's that these are items that were imbued by some previous owner who had a power that was more in line with that. But not anybody can use those. You have to be someone who has a power that is, connected to that has a thematic connection. All of which is to say, we got to throw in a bunch of fun, just dark and weird abilities for the Necromedic. So one of those is the ability to like create a portal to avoid dimension and push people through it. We're also there's one that's a bit more experimental that I think it's probably going to stay, but I don't know for sure. But there's one where she can sort of transfer damage. So she can cast it on somebody, and then the next person who takes damage, whoever that is, it goes to that person instead. And that's a nice, very flexible ability where it can have multiple different parts of it that could be useful to you in different situations. That's the great thing about swap abilities, which are they're in heat signature and they're going to be in this game as well. And almost every game that has them, it becomes my favorite ability in that game. Swap is a great power, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about why it's so good. And one of the reasons it's so good is that it has two effects, and it's sort of agnostic as to what the desired effect is. Like the ability swap, when you put that in a game, you aren't necessarily thinking, and the player will use this to transport themselves. And that's the only use, because of course the player can use it to transport whatever they're swapping with. And that makes it very flexible. So transference is a sort of play on that of a thing where it does two things. It protects one person from damage completely, and it heaps damage on another person potentially. Or maybe there's a situation where you just want to protect someone from one damage, and you transfer the other damage to the only person in line of sight, which is one of your own wizards. Or maybe it's going to be a huge amount of damage and you transfer it to a fellow wizard and it kills them, but then you can res them. And yeah, that kind of stuff is really fun to play with. We've also, a lot of these things, the path we ended up going down was helping your teammates. Because originally the Necromedic was just, she has a gun to like kill her patients with. And originally she was just going to shoot people with that gun. I thought that was kind of entertainingly simple. But Steve felt, and I think he's right, that just turned her into just the damage dealer, which was a bit boring compared to the others. Everyone else sort of had more of a unique twist. And, the res ability not being sort of, it's not something you use every turn, certainly. It's a bit of a specialist thing. And she needs a main ability that she uses every turn, or almost every turn. And so we did a lot of experiments on that and ended up going with a sort of a debuff effect that you throw on. It's a sedative flask, and you throw it and it splashes everyone in a certain radius, and everyone gets both sedated, which means they're sort of, it's like poison, but they're going to pass out at the end, not die. And they also get unsteady, which means that when you knock them back, they go further than they normally would. So it basically magnifies knockback. And that is a great fit with the Freelance Witch, who pushes people around. It turns some of her abilities that would normally only nudge them slightly into things that now do significant knockback. And of course it stacks. And it costs an action to do that. But then Navy Seer can spend his mana to give you actions, so he can cause you to, permit you to do it more than once per turn. And of course, Navy Seer needs mana to do that, and Necromedic can give mana to Navy Seer by killing him and bringing him back. So there's a whole time trick thing going on between those two that can be very fun. And the unsteady thing also works well with him because he only does one knockback normally, which is kind of irrelevant a lot of the time. But if you magnify it, then it gets a lot more relevant. So yeah, there's a lot of fun things with that. And as soon as you give someone a core ability that mainly sets up other teammates for success, it just pushes you to play much more in the way that we want you to, which is not, and it's not about it being one big happy family of people who are sort of like being nice to each other, because the Necromedic is the least nice character we have on our team. I'm just getting to start writing that at the moment, and that's getting to be fun. But the reason that cooperation between your characters is a good route for us to go and leads to exciting solutions and cool plans is that it's kind of makes you use the whole brain. I was torn there between saying using the whole brain or every part of the buffalo. It's if your teammates interact in order to be effective, then it's a sort of larger puzzle to deal with. It's a more substantial thing to think your way around. And your solution is going to have several moving parts. And it's getting pretty fun even just having 3 people in a mission instead of 2. The whole first chapter of the game is just 2 characters, and then the third one, the second one introduces the third. And yeah, just having that level of inter-character interaction is really cool. As it goes on, we're not just going to keep ratcheting up. There are more wizards to introduce, but I personally don't enjoy that XCOM wants you to use a squad of 6 all the time. It's too fucking much. I just get to the point where I'm just like, oh god, it's taking me 15 minutes to move these 4 guys, and I've got 2 more to go. And I'm like, just do a sensible thing. And in fact, that wouldn't work at all in our game because there is no do a sensible thing. I mean, some people, I guess, like Navy Seer could fire his gun at somebody, his assault staff, because it just does damage and knockback. And the knockback, it does matter what it's going to knock them into, but it's less of a big deal. But yeah, it would be bad if it got to that point, because the whole spirit of the game, the whole fun of it, the whole point of it is to think carefully about what you're doing with your people and to have room to experiment with it, and yeah, enough brain space and enough motivation to play around with these puzzle pieces and fit them together. All of which is an especially ripe area for us, like a very high value thing for us, because one of our main features is that you can always rewind your turn. So you can always just undo an action all the way back up to the start of your turn. And so the complex things and non-obvious interactions and subtle side effects, especially things like transference and swap, are especially good for us because we allow you and encourage you to just try those things, just test something out. And then if it has a surprising effect, you get to see that. And if it wasn't what you wanted, you can undo it. But often you find that you test something and you're like, oh shit, that actually puts me in a situation where now I can do this. And that's really valuable. Like that kind of second order interactions and third order interactions are where a lot of the most fun solutions live. And I think that the whole sort of thesis of this game really is that I think you can get at that stuff better if you can try it. I think there's no visualization, no preview, no prediction we can show you that will ever be as good as letting you just try it and see, and then rewind if it doesn't work and try something else.